My project is on Roman influence on today's architecture. The first thing we'll discuss is concrete. The Romans introduced the use of concrete in buildings, which became the most efficient and cost-effective material to use when constructing buildings. It was because it was produced locally, and concrete was also easily decorated, which they really like to decorate things, so that was good for them. Also because concrete is strong, it was able to be a sturdier building material for them. It eventually led to the creation of paved roads, which are used everywhere today. So the Romans get credit for perfecting the arch. They were the first to use the arch above ground, and they utilized it both structurally and decoratively. They were able to build large-scale buildings by using the arch and in combination with concrete, which we just talked about, because they were able to support more weight with it. Today we're seeing arches being made out of steel versus concrete because same reason, it can support more weight than concrete, so we're constantly moving forward with that. This made it so the Romans were able to build buildings on such a large scale that was not previously possible. Aqueducts were previously all underground, just like arches were, so the Romans were the first to have them above ground. And they were the first to join a line of these arches with a channel on top of them to carry water. They did construct them all over, not just in their region. They did go to Germany, France, Spain, and Turkey, and the diversity of their buildings meant that they were able to have continuity. They were able to stay around, which is why we also see it a lot in today's architecture. There are three main types of columns that we're going to review, Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian. The Doric columns are the ones on the left here. They are the oldest and the simplest form of columns. You can see there's not much ornamentation to them. The Ionic ones are the ones in the middle. They're generally characterized by the top part of the column where you see the two opposed spiral scrolls. And then we have the Corinthian, which is the one on the far right. They're the most ornate columns. They're used on more elegant buildings. The columns were not just used as ornamentation, but they were also used as support beams, which, just like everything else, also enabled the Romans to construct large-scale buildings, which hadn't been done before. Next we have the amphitheaters, which were made out of stone and concrete. They utilized both arches and columns in their structure. Their purpose was to support as many people who would attend events like the gladiator fights. These amphitheaters were originally constructed out of wood, and then they were torn down after each gladiator fight. But once gladiator fights became popular, they started to construct permanent amphitheaters, which you see in this picture, that were made out of that stone and concrete. So we see domes everywhere in today's society, but the Romans introduced a large-scale dome, just like all of the other large-scale things that they introduced. They created the dome by rotating arches around to actually make that structure. When engineers were first constructing these domes, they carved coffers in them, which were just intricate shapes that you can see in this picture. It looks like this one has squares. But they also made a hole at the top called an oculus. The oculus let the light in, and then the coffers, they actually reduced the weight of the dome so that it wasn't too heavy to sit on top of any of their buildings. Finally, we have bathhouses. The water for these bathhouses was provided by the aqueducts that the Romans constructed as well, and the water was replaced once it was used. People would go to these for social centers. They even had exercise areas in some of them, but these bathhouses also incorporated the arches and concrete and columns that the Romans had come up with as well in their architecture. So here we're able to see monuments that were inspired by Roman architecture. Obviously we have the Arc de Triomphe in France there. We have the Jefferson Memorial, the White House, Federal Hall, and Union Station. A lot of these have columns, arches, domes, lots of combinations of the Roman architecture that we just reviewed.